motion to, oh,
Yep. Motion to approve the minutes as stated.
okay, so done. So be it.
Okay.
All right, so we move to updates, reports, and presentations, starting with the introduction of Police Chief Chris Bailey.
Okay, we're not going to take a whole lot of time. I just wanted for the community and obviously just wanted him to come up. Chris has been with us, almost 3 weeks now, started on July 29th. He is out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We're so glad to have him here. I think last week it was trial by fire. He had to be at a committee meeting that lots of good conversation around the consent to search. And if you don't mind, if he could just come up and we just spend maybe a couple of minutes for him to introduce himself.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the confidence that Deborah has in me, and I look forward to working with all of you. Continue years and working with each one of you, and I'd love to meet with you and talk about what your priorities are and how APD can help you and continue to make Asheville and a great place to live, work, and play. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, we'll go there to the noise ordinance update.
All right. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Chris Collins with the city's Development Services Department. And I'm here with Claire Richardson, also from the Development Services Department. We're going to kind of break this presentation up for you guys. As you know, I understand Ben Woody has given you a preliminary presentation on this, and Ben is unfortunately on vacation this week. Probably not unfortunate for him.
Yeah, I
but,
was gonna say.
so we're filling in for him, but we are also part of the team that is working on this ordinance update. So we'll give you a real brief review, but since I know Ben spent some time on this before, we'll keep that part brief and get into, well, next slide's actually the overview. So brief review of our goals and talk about our equity and engagement efforts so far on this, and then get into our You've seen this slide before, was to engage multiple groups of the population, because it really is a far-reaching. You've got people who make noise, people who receive noise. It impacts pretty much everybody out there. And try to prioritize noise concerns. And then upon that was to balance local residents and local businesses' needs and recognize that everybody is important to the economy and how it all works. Said to develop an ordinance that contains clear, enforceable, and effective measures to control noise. You'll see as we go through this why we've realized a lot of us have been really heavily dependent on collaboration with other city departments. Worked with ITS for a lot of our GIS analysis, the data analysis we've done, and you'll see there's been a lot of data involved. It's been very data-driven. Community and economic development, specifically Dana Frankel getting us in touch with the right folks downtown, which is a noisy place. So a lot of our work has gone on there. Community and public engagement, getting the word out, helping the surveys. Equity and inclusion, Kimberly Archie and Yashika Smith have been really helpful on getting. So that's been awesome. So people. Guiding principles, you've seen this slide most likely before. These are things we keep coming back to as we go through this process right now. We've highlighted here to prioritize equity as a lens, right? Especially important, always important, especially important when you're dealing with something that truly affects the entire population of our city. So reaching out to everybody and making this fair to everybody is important. All right, so luckily we have a tool for that now, and it's been, we've really delved into this tool, and this is the Racial Equity Toolkit that's now part of our set here in Asheville. And we've really been diving into this, trying to, it's a relatively new to us tool, so we've had the pleasure of really being able to jump into it and work through it with the noise ordinance. So I'll talk a little bit about how we've used that in our engagement efforts so far. And we've found a lot of success with it, so it's been awesome. Sums up a multi-page document, but there are 6 questions that the toolkit asks us, or asks us to ask ourselves about what we're doing. And that's, what is our proposal and the desired results, the scope. Hopefully we're doing that question, and this helps us really examine that. Second question is highlighted because it's really heavy. What's the data? What does the data tell us? You kind of have to answer that question before you really can answer the questions for 3, 4. What are your strategies for advancing racial equity, and what's your plan for implementation? I'll probably come back to this slide once or twice here as we go through what we've done. All right, so we started with a plan for the framework for that, and it turned into all of our summers. Definitely, it was a big effort, and detailing it here. The initial phase of that was an open City Hall survey that was out from March to end of June, wherein we collected 1,490 survey responses. We were happy with that because that's over 1% of the city's population. So that was a good indicator, getting us off on the right foot. That wasn't operating in a vacuum. We had a few other operations going on. We were working with the Noise Lab at Boston University, who already had a program running for a smartphone app, Noise Score, to help people gauge sound levels and the perception. We passed out over 750 business cards that directed people to the project page and the URL of the survey. Hearing some things as survey were coming in, certain things were popping up. All that, we also held at 23 stakeholder meetings and forums throughout this process. Those were all mixed up between residents and neighborhood groups, business and industry groups, and of course council committees. The backbone of that, we held 3 larger targeted meetings with our resident, well actually we held 2. SPARS, that one was really well attended. And then our industrial and institutional groups, UNCA, Mission Hospital, waste hauling companies, folks like that. We really were impressed, we were happy to get the number of people at the table we did. I will say our 2, but we had a lot of voter exposure to residents, so that we've done all this and maintained what we hope is a complete project webpage and timely press releases to keep everybody informed and engaged. So through this process, we learned a lot of things from this initial engagement process. And if we go back to this slide, question 2, well, from this, we gained a lot of data, right? We analyzed that data, what was mappable and what was not mappable. Of course, we have things that could be put on the ground and measured, and then we had comments and open-ended stuff, right? So we took the city block group by block group and analyzed these factors here. The trend that emerged for us, going back to the toolkit in an iterative fashion and continuing to analyze was that and proximity to known resources, like foreign cities, highways, things like that. And kind of analyze that against the engagement or the participation level in the opt-in work that we had done so far. That told us, and block groups, that told us that we had 5 block groups in the that made up 29% of the calls for service about noise, but only composed about 8. 4 of them, we can say 4 or 5, that all shared these characteristics, that they have high residential density, higher than average African American population, contain subsidized housing, and were at least 2 times the poverty rate for the rest of the city. So that was a huge in what we've done. And as you can see, we identified these by identifying areas with high noise impacts, but low engagement, folks we had not heard from yet. But obviously noise was playing a role. Noise was definitely impacting these communities. So right there, going back through this tool, we identified a major gap in our data and our engagement efforts so far. We are, well, all this data, plus some of the more qualitative data from the survey, which was the words people used to tell us what was causing noise impacts in their life. Less paper copies of the survey, but for English and Spanish. Use that information about areas where we had not been engaging successfully and actually distributed those to, it's hard to find a good central point to get those surveys to. So I don't think any of us felt like these were perfect points, but we did distribute them to places that were centers of communities. Prominent churches, community centers and libraries, as well as the public housing communities, which were part of those block groups that we saw. We spent time trying to engage and actually did get a couple of paper surveys back from the houseless population. And worked with the Spanish language newspaper to get the word out for our Spanish-speaking population. The survey online was also available in Spanish. I don't think we got a lot of engagement there, so maybe that's another gap we're trying to cover. But we met individually with the buskers. We had heard a lot in the survey about the buskers, so we organized a group of those folks, got together with them, talked to them about noise and sound, and that was an awesome meeting. Had a couple of meetings with music about live music and music producing venues. Trying to get some idea of what challenges they face, and also community organizations representing that group to see how noise is impacting them, because we had heard a little bit about that as well. That is to say, we did all this, and those get about 27 paper surveys back. We don't feel like we fully engaged those areas yet, so that's next on our list of how to tackle that. And I know that Ben is in contact with David Nash from the Housing Authority, and they're working on setting up an initial meeting to figure out a good strategy here. So moving forward, the engagement, I guess, we started this, we're like, hey, this is the engagement phase, this is the ordinance writing phase, and this, but actually I don't think the engagement phase ever ends. So we'll just keep it going. So from that data-driven approach, we came to understand a few things. The data told us a few we have a lot of high call volume. What we know about those right now is they're typically probably resident-on-resident call volumes instead of like your Haywood Road resident complaining about a loud bar kind of situation. So we
Sometimes just because they want to kind of get back, or sometimes because they just want police presence. They want police to be in tune about a neighbor, about another issue, so they'll kind of gauge whether it is a legit complaint.
We're hoping to, either through further data analysis on police calls or on the ground research at the communities, find out what point, right? It might be notes in a call, or they might be
Right now, there's space outside, and to me, that's
Yeah.
not noise to me. But to other people who are more sensitive to that being a part of music,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to hip hop and pop music that's more popular from a certain ethnicity, to me, that's not noise.
Right.
You know, but to other people, that is noise. So how do we use that as an education tool? Like, this is not what I call excess. This is normal to me, and it's kind of like white noise to me. But when, to you, it can be a complete nuisance. You can just interrupt my,
right,
you know.
serene space. It's a huge thing. We realize
Because
the
it becomes a
perception.
cultural issue.
Yeah, the perception of sound, what's
Yeah.
noise and what's not, is
Yeah.
different from all sorts of people. We try to do some activities on that in our engagement. That actually leads really well into this slide. Let me tell you about a couple of these things here.
We know we are trying to dig a little deeper into those calls for service so that we can understand patterns, right? Is it 5 people or 10 people consistently calling? And I think that will help us understand more in terms of, is this a widespread issue, or is it a couple of people who generally are complaining, and we need to have some additional outreach and education to those individuals, or to that building, or to that complex, or to that. That's why the data-driven approach is just so important for us. Have to dig much, much deeper. I was really surprised that the majority of the complaints were coming from minority communities. Intuitively, I wouldn't have thought that. But I think, again, because we have a tool that we are able to use as we are adopting and developing public policy, that forces us to dig deeper and ask more and thorough questions before we move to automatically just developing data. I'm sorry, policy.
I just don't want our officers to be used in that manner, and I know noise is a real issue, but to me, when we have to deploy resources out, I don't know if we have to just be running around trying to figure out, trying to legitimize whether this is a true complaint, so it's a waste of time. That's why it's really important that you get that extra data.
I think that data, the surveys we did get back from those areas, a lot of things were.
They won't, I can't even hear them.
So I think coordination is good. Learn a little bit more about how things are, how things are structured out there, and maybe perception could be beneficial.
So there is a club reform that
That's, yeah.
outside.
Outside of our. this work to strengthen and build community relationships with community-based groups, a lot of them I mentioned already. Neighborhood representatives, Coalition of National Neighborhoods has been a huge participant in the process so far. Really helpful to continue to engage these kinds of groups, have those partners in this whole process. And the business community, of course, folks we talked to already. We talked to folks like the restaurants, stores, bars, and restaurants, air, restaurants. These are relationships that's important for us to continue as we develop new materials. So that's kind of the broad picture. What I'm going to do now is hand off to Claire to take you through some of our next steps in the ordinance. It's an important heard from citizen engagement.
Morning. When you do all an update, I've heard from folks from all of our engagements so far, big picture update, and tell you all about what we're going to do next. Right. So far, we've heard a wide breadth of folks in all of our engagement.
Ashland Police Department. Sergeant over the school resource officers. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and update everyone and give an overview of the program that we have at the Ashland Police Department with the Ashland City Schools. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to ask. I'm glad to answer whatever I can. So we'll go ahead and get started. The goal of the school resource officer program is a collaboration between Ashland Police Department and city schools. We work hand in hand with each other almost on a daily basis. We're there to protect every child. We want to create an environment that is safe so they can reach their fullest potential. They're also there to protect not only the children, faculty, staff, parents that visit, any other visits, so that everyone can have a safe and productive and a quality experience. Here's some of the fundamentals that a school resource officer does, or what their goal is each day. Number one is presence. Officer presence is always important. It helps deter criminal activity, criminal behavior, just being there, being seen. That's the beginning. Next one, building and maintaining positive relationships. This is probably one of the most important pieces of a school resource officer. They need to be engaged. They need to be building those positive relationships with the students, the faculty, also the parents as well. And they also need to maintain those. Developing trust is a big part of it. There's many times that a school resource officer will hear something before any administrator does, because they do have a good relationship. And the group we have now, this happens all the time, where they can go ahead, hear that, get something taken care of before it becomes a bigger issue. And that brings us into our next one, being proactive and anticipate. Now, when you see proactive, that's not like proactive patrols. One thing that I have the group really focused on this year is being proactive in not only engaging the students, because they already do a good job at that. Obviously, we can grow and build on that. Engage them in some type of programming. They created a group called Lunch Buddies or Reading Buddies, where they'll go meet with the kids, read with them, different stuff like that, to where they can get good information, be proactive. Let's say there was a threat. Instead of waiting until it became real or not, let's go ahead and talk to them, the experts, and talk to those young men and women, get them to a counselor if they need to be. Mentoring is a big part of it, and settle it there without it becoming something that would reach either a criminal or even a disciplinary behavior. Another part of preparation is really important, especially in today's world with the mass violence, the gun violence, active shooters. The SROs, they need to know their school as well as anybody, obviously. They need to be prepared. Also, they need to prepare other patrol officers that are going to respond there. So what they'll do is they'll set up tours, they'll bring them in, patrol officers will come in and have lunch, they'll have lunch with the kids, get to know people, get to know the areas. That way, if they ever do have to respond for a mass violent incident, active shooter, something like that, they know the area, they know the staff, they know the kids, so they're going to be able to handle that much more quickly and efficiently than they would if they didn't know.
Does that plan include teachers and administration? Like if anything happened, would there be some kind of command, everybody would know exactly what to do?
Yes, part of what the school resource officers do is they must be at the school. When there's going to be a lockdown drill, fire drill, any drills that are going to be done, that school resource officer, and just to clarify, we have two that are always at Asheville High. We have one that's always at Asheville Middle School, but we have two that cover all of the elementary schools and the primary schools. So they're on a rotation, we'll get to that soon, but they know they need to be there on the day they're going to do those drills, so they're interacting with the kids and the teachers can give feedback, because that's really important. And it also gives the teachers, that they get to see it more as, hey, this is real training, this lockdown drill is important, so they can take it as serious as well. Some SRO training, and in addition to what we have to go through mandated training at the Asheville Police Department, fair and impartial policing, implicit bias training, racial equity. They also have to attend a 40-hour SRO certification course through the North Carolina Justice Academy. That's mandated. They also must be crisis intervention trained, CIT. Not only just for carrying certain items as an officer, but that is also a requirement in our contract with National City Schools. So that's important as well. This also feeds in what we'll talk about later with building relationships, recognizing mental awareness. Those are all huge parts of the mentoring program that the SROs are involved with. Disciplinary action, this is always a question that comes up, and there's a lot of different scenarios that can come up with this. School resource officers are not there to be part of the disciplinary process. They're not going to administer discipline. That's when it comes to administrators. They will respond, obviously, when they're called. There are 16 criminal offenses that must be reported to them through legislation, general statute. So they'll respond. One that always comes up is a fight. You got two kids that got into a fight. By the letter of the law, it's criminal, but they're not going to address it as criminal. They're going to let the schools handle that unless there's some serious injury or other circumstances that fall under legislation that they have to address that. And then off of that, they're also going to probably sit down with each student, maybe separate or at the same time in one situation. They're going to talk to them and mentor them. So that way, instead of them being in there in a negative light, they're going to turn that into a positive relationship building. They always, they try to avoid making arrests or filing criminal charges or even juvenile petitions. They really try to focus more on, once again, mentoring. They really try to set up things with the counselors, the social workers at the schools if they can. Obviously, there are certain circumstances that are directed by legislation where they must file charges. Good thing with this is a lot of it goes through the juvenile justice system. And starting December 1st with the new age change, pretty much everyone they encounter will go through that, which is more geared toward, remedial type factors instead of punitive. So that's going to be real good, and they have a really good relationship with juvenile justice counselors as well. They talk a lot, try to come up with the best way to handle these situations as opposed to, jail or community service or something like that. Some new approaches for this year. I've just recently come back over the school resource officers I didn't have last year. We're really going to focus on the two elementary school resource officers, and this goes back to the proactive piece we talked about earlier. They have a regimented schedule where they're going to be at this school this day, this school this day, so they know. Their administrators know, the students know that they're going to be there on this day. Obviously, if they get called to another school, then they're going to go this way. This helps with our programming. I know the principal at the primary school talked to her yesterday. She's like, this is great. I know that I'm going to have my school resource officer here on Thursday. I want to set up this schedule for him to work with these kids, check the campus, things like that.
So we don't have a resource officer full-time during school hours?
At
Each elementary school?
We don't have, we have 7 elementary schools, so no, we have 2 that split those. Also, once again, they'll be involved with mentoring on those days. Lunch talks, sit down, have lunch with kids, talk about it. That's kind of like, 2 kids come in, they had some type of issue that day. It's good for the school resource officer to sit down. A lot of times they build relationships. If you go to the football game on Friday night, SRO Jones, big guy, 6'7", he's been to elementary school, middle school, and now he's at the high school. All those kids that he knew back in elementary school, they just flock around him. That's a perfect example of what we're trying to reach for all our SROs and for the program. And they're also tasked with providing programming in their school, and some of those programs, IRL, in real life program, every Tuesday from 4:15 to 5:15, sit down with a group of kids and they rotate through. We do, our bomb squad will come in and do a demonstration with the robots. They really love that. We have some electronic kids who do that twice a year. One at Halloween where they put together this kit with electronics and the lights light up a certain way. it's really fun to watch these kids do that and how much, they actually, one of the young men actually had to help one of our SROs complete his, and it was kind of fun. Reading buddies, that's what, even the high school SROs, since there's two of them, one will go to maybe an elementary school or one of the other schools, read with the kids so they're involved, that's really good. Always the lockdown drills. They're part of the Asheville City School Safety Team. One thing that we started having to do this year, instead of just one SRO always attending the district safety meeting, they're going to rotate. Everyone's going to go, they're going to be able to be involved over there. Juvenile misdemeanor diversion program, that's another tool that they have. And this is important because when you have a first-time offender and it's a misdemeanor, they can divert them to that program where they'll meet with their staff, do what they need to do, and it goes away. So that they don't have criminal charges, they don't get behind on stuff like that. And it just gives them a better opportunity to move on. For making a simple decision here or there that, they said, hey, we should have made it. They're part of the critical traumatic incident response team that the schools have. One important thing that often we don't realize is the school resource officers don't just deal with incidents at schools. When there is something that happens in a neighborhood or community, someone gets hurt or killed, that flows over into schools the next day. Schools have a really good program with the SROs to get the kids involved into counseling that day, see what they may or may not need, stuff like that. So it may not happen at school, but it's still going to come back to school the next day. And then their school resource officer posts, that's important to know where they need to be, identify the best place to be in the morning at drop off. Lunchtime is always a hot topic. Class change in the hallways. If they're out there in those posts engaging the kids, chances are they're going to be able to take care of something before it comes into something bigger that they would have to maybe take some type of enforcement. Something new, just looking at research-wise, across the country, this is starting to make its way over here, started primarily in New Mexico and Washington. Indiana, Carmel does this. Social and emotional learning. Now, our school resource officers, they already do some of this. This is a focus, more of a focus training that helps with social and emotional learning, such as CIT, but there's so many other options that we're looking at that, hey, we need to get our guys and gals in this so they can provide better quality service at the schools. One thing that we've already looked at is like the school resource officer conference that they go to every year. That's North Carolina's. I know this year, and it's more of a symposium where there's different courses and stuff you can take. I know this year the feedback from the guys was that there wasn't anything real new to learn. So this right here is a focus on the national level for the conference. So we've already taught the schools about looking at the national conference to find some new ideas, especially with this being a focus. So that's going to be important going forward. And that's what I have. Any questions?
So I heard a lot of good things about our student resource officers. The main thing I wanted to get out of today is kind of like a continuation of a conversation that we're having around the opportunity gap,
Right.
the achievement gap, and a big part of that conversation was the disparity in disciplinary action.
Right.
So, I know a lot of times, I don't know how you evaluate the seriousness of a teacher or administrative complaint.
Right.
Because if it falls within that 16 that you described, then it calls for arrest, I think.
It doesn't, the schools must report it to the school resource. That is something they must, none of the schools are
So
good.
that's one thing, like reporting, a report that comes from a school teacher who might be embellishing, who might need some of that social emotional training, because,
Right.
how they evaluate, how they weigh a problem could be subjective. But when they report to you all that this falls within the 16 and is subject to arrest, then we have more of our kids going through the juvenile justice system system. And once you're in, you know, statistics say that it's a continuation of this lifelong involvement with law enforcement. So I just wanted to get, just kind of put it out there, my concern, so that you all will be able to evaluate how we move forward, because I think we're doing it within the team that we have to evaluate, like, the high volume of referrals written, which teachers are writing the most on which students, and is it overkill? Are they, you know, because I don't want a child to be labeled just because they have behavioral issues or mental issues that may turn into a criminal issue.
Right. And not to get off folks here, but before I came here, I actually was a teacher in the school system, not here, but in Trinity County. And even as a teacher and a coach, I saw where there was certain teachers would get referrals a lot more than others. So that's one thing that, bringing that knowledge and then talking to the guys, you know, with Officer Jones, Officer Galls, they've been there for a while. At least twice a week, we get together as a group. Now, this is important to me, and we discuss incidents that may or may not occur, that may or may not involve arrest or not, and say, hey, was this something that we should have been addressing, or was this a school rule violation? How could we have handled it better if we could? And then what avenues could we take? So I completely get what you're saying. So if they encounter something like that, they can, we discuss it, and they always try, just report it to them. They're gonna do, they're very good at doing juvenile investigations. They're gonna do the follow-up, and there's sometimes when they're like, this is not as serious as it was initially reported, but it had to be reported. Let's go ahead and let's get them down here to the counselor, not actually walk them down and sit with them with the counselor, and if they're asked to stay, they will not. So that's something that we're always on a weekly basis. I think it's important to discuss each and every scenario that comes up, because there's so many, and always look at improving each time if we can. So I think that.
But you all do have a voice in that evaluation during that time of reporting before you take action and make an arrest.
Absolutely. And we have, you know, we always have the discretion with the misdemeanors. You know, there's times when it is a felony, we have a less discretion, but with especially misdemeanor situation, we have a discretion what we're going to charge them on. Let's look at all these factors. Let's involve some others, administrators, and that's why it's important to build those relationships with the administrators and counselors, to trust each other that we're getting the correct message, because a lot of times information travels to different parties, you lose some of the content. So that's an important part of it.
Because I was also just looking at, state legislation where they passed, what's it called, raise the age.
Right.
And I'm just kind of looking at how many of our 16 and 17-year-olds were arrested and charged as an adult, from incidents that happened in school.
Right.
You know, so as our state is making adjustments to kind of mitigate those arrests, I just wanted to have a conversation with you all, because I know you all are very clear about what's going on statewide, to make sure that we're proactive on our end, you know, to make sure that we are treating children and their behaviors as behaviors and not.
And that will help them, when they do the referral to juvenile justice. Statistically, most of the referrals that go to juvenile justice do not result in punitive type, response. It's more of a remedial response. So that should help, and it should mitigate going forward, because everything's going to go through juvenile justice instead of straight to the adult, court system. Any other questions?
The lady at the very top of the picture, she has a great reputation. All of them do, as I reported before, has a great reputation, but I've seen parents on the street, like, really talk to her, address her, so she's doing a wonderful job, because middle school is.
It's a tough day.
It's tough. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Whoever's doing the agenda, can we change it? It's school resource officers, not student resource officers. I mean, just maybe confusion in someone's head. Because I was like, where's the student in here? Thank you.
Okay, now we move to APD downtown district.
provide some opportunities to improve opportunities for safety and mobility for our residents and visitors that visit our central area of our city. And then APD also identified the potential for increasing calls for service and just demand in both the South Slope neighborhood, the River Arts area, downtown, and south side of the city. And so you, thanks to your generosity, funded us an additional 15 positions to bring our authorized strength to 238 police officers in order to staff a central district. And you know, as we look at the future, and especially on the in the River Arts District, we're building trails and greenways, and so that's going to require a hybrid type of policing in a high density downtown type environment, one that requires traditional policing in a vehicle, foot, bicycle patrols to deal with those growing communities that we're having as a city. So what we've been doing, and then what are we doing the rest of the year to hopefully implement this central district in January of 2020. First, we needed to examine the boundaries that are currently in place by examining call volume and personnel, resources, and all that to try to develop the boundary lines, which I'll show you shortly, which we've done. Work now is to try to make sure that we retain the workforce that we have and continue to build our workforce to the 238, because you're going to see at the end, although you appropriated the additional 15 spots, we're actually still down 15 spots from the 238 total. And we'll break that down what our staffing looks like. In order to make sure that we've allocated our personnel properly, we have to look at the calls for service, the response times, as well, to make sure that they're staffing each of the districts properly to meet the needs of the community. And then we'll reallocate as necessary and keep monitoring. But we also want to take, once it's finalized, take what we're going to do out to the communities, out to each of the districts to discuss with them how they're going to be impacted by these changes. So here is the anticipated new 4-district makeup of the APD. There has been some significant adjustments to Baker sector at the north. West Asheville is pretty much intact the way it was. Speak correctly there, Jim. And then the Baker sector is a little bit different. It's more northeast rather than just the north. The David sector, or excuse me, sector, something we use in Indianapolis. David district is right smack in the central of the city, and then we have South Asheville. Here's a more close-up version of what you saw there, and just so that you're clear, the David district will lie between Baker and Charlie and have 4 beats. Beat 1 is geographic area between Hilliard Avenue north to 240 and Biltmore Avenue and east. Beat 2 is the area east of Beat 1, includes the neighborhood of around Martin Luther King Drive. Beat 3 is the area southwest of Beat 1, includes the South French Broad neighborhood. Beat 4 is east of the river, includes the River Arts District. Current staffing numbers funded for 238 sworn law enforcement positions. Our current staffing is broken down. You can see that we have 201 officers that are available. Some of those in different variants. We have some that are injured and military duty and such. There are 12 currently in the basic law enforcement training academy at AV Tech. We have 10 in field training, 223 staff. We still have 15 vacant positions, which we are constantly recruiting for. We've been testing in order to get a class built up, which would start in January of this year. Also looking at possibility of laterals and working with the city manager's office to make sure that we have a robust recruitment process, that we're compensating our folks the right way, that we're giving them the things that keep them here. We are probably one of the best trained agencies in Western North Carolina. What that does is it attracts our candidates to other places who don't have to spend the time, energy, or money to train our officers, because we provide them with quite a bit of training. That is a quick summary of where we're at. I'm answering questions that you may have, if I can answer them.
Do you have a breakdown of how many officers are assigned to each district? They are working.
Monday to discuss that, what that looks like, because the call volumes changed with this redistribution. In a previous presentation that I looked at yesterday, it broke them down to, it was a 2017 budget presentation. But in this new layout, based solely on calls for service, it would break it down. I believe that they had West Nashville 20% of the calls for service. The Central would be about 30% of the calls for service. Northeast or Bay Area would be about 30% of the calls for service, and then Charlie and the South Side about 20% of the calls for service. That's how it's currently broken down when you just look at call volume. We also looked at the response times. The response times in the city are highest, were highest in that what used to be Baker, which was all of the east side plus all of everything south. And so you can imagine if you're an officer that got dispatched to the top of that and had to get to near the airport, that your time is going to be a little bit slower. So we're trying to reduce those response times as well by the redistribution of the districts.
As far as the David district, 15 officers, how would they rank?
So once we're at full staffing, how it'll break down throughout the city is going to be based on call volume and response time. So having 30% of the call volume, there will be a district that has more officers than some of the other districts. Plus, it's a unique environment. If we're going to be patrolling on bicycle along near the river, then we're not got enough vehicles in the cars to respond to calls for service as they're out there. So it will be a district that are constantly looking at to see if we need to continue to add people as we move forward. We also have to be mindful that we don't sacrifice the safety and protections for their neighborhoods. Thank you.
Business? Time for public comment? Any public comment?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Yes.
the new business, not
That's all right.
apologize, and this is more administrative. As you know, we have, I guess, created some, we'll call it portfolios for our assistant city managers as well as for me. And the public safety committee will now be in my portfolio, so I will be your staff person that's assigned to support this committee. And we'll be making these announcements at the rest of our committee meetings in terms of who would be the actual staff people assigned to support the council committees. So looking forward to working with you all. And
I would like to bring up something that, I feel like since we've moved to this time slot, that public attendance is down. I'm wondering if this time slot has anything to do with that? I think this is a committee that's very important for the public to be engaged in and done at the time, make the meetings. I would like us to look at the possibility of moving this to an actual admin. And now, public comment.
Hey guys, morning. So morning.
No, it's not.
Okay, that explains that more. So I'm Michael Stratton, I live in the Oakland community, live right on Fairview Road, I heard we're gonna be talking about noise today. I'm here and I understand that we're not gonna be discussing automotive, noise levels, and I can understand that because I guess the state of North Carolina allows us to license, and tag vehicles across the state, anything from, Harley Davidson to big trucks. And I get that, but I guess my concern, my question is what is my recourse as a homeowner on Fairview Road very frequent basis with straight pipes, mufflers, you know, that kind of thing. To me, seems like we need to focus, maybe carve out a lot of nuance on that component. Again, with all cars are fine, but maybe like the ones that are at least not permissible to be on the road. Straight pipes, they're not gonna be able to get past the inspection. It's obvious, like when I hear that, I have to stop my